Hey guys, VaulSC here, thanks for watching as always. Today I'm going to be talking about infiNity, more specifically the Aleph faction of infiNity, and more specifically than that, the OSS sectorial, and even more specifically than that, the fireteam options, and even more specifically and in particular, the HARIS fireteam options. That's where you've got three people linked up. It's not a core of 4 or 5, it's just 3. And I'm going to be focusing on that in this video because ever since OSS came out, I've sort of obsessively been thinking and analyzing all of the HARIS options in the sectorial, more so than in other sectorials, just because I find them so interesting. So I know that you guys are normally used to watching me do a battle report or a full-blown faction sectorial. This one's just going to be specific. We're going to be talking about the Asura, the Yadu trooper, the Rudra, the Deva, the Shakti even, people who can link up into a HARIS team. Note that I've already done the full-blown sectorial video of OSS, so you can always check that out as well if you want a more comprehensive view of the faction as a whole. But for this one, I'm going to be recovering some of that material and overlapping this video with the last one about OSS in general, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper and be a little bit more detailed about the fire teams themselves, the HARIS options, and go from there. So what's prompted this? What's really gotten me interested in the HARIS options? Well, I feel that it was the changes to the Asura that came out when we had this sectorial break onto the scene. Let's talk about the Asura to begin with. So ever since I started playing infiNity, I've always been of the opinion that this profile, this type of model, is a bit on the weaker side because it doesn't deliver enough relative to its points cost investment. You've got a very expensive model, the cheapest profile is 68, the most expensive one 78 as far as I can tell here. And you've got a model that is relying on multispectral visor level 3, which is a great ability, but the longest range gun that you can give it is a Spitfire. So when you're starting in your deployment zone, you're trying to move out. If you are encountering a sniper rifle or a missile launcher or an HMG, you're completely outranged. It's -3 to hit, -3 for cover at long range. And even though you may have BS-14, plenty of armor, MSV-3, it's just not a very efficient model for moving out and gunning things down. So that's one reason why I often sort of overlooked the Asura and felt that the Asura is not that good compared to, say, the Torontid or even the Aquila with HMG, because those models make much better use of MSV3 in my view. So she's very, very expensive. What's ended up changing, though, with her primarily? Well, first of all, she's now linkable, so you can walk around with an extra dice on your Spitfire, potentially. And I do say Spitfire because I feel like that's the most relevant profile for her. She's really there to be attacking and doing damage and getting value for her points. So she can move around with a link, but secondarily, she can bring with her something else that might be able to help with those range bands. So if she links up with something which can take care of the longer range, or even the very, very short range, 0 to 8, or act as a specialist when she may not be, choosing the hacking profile, that is a bonus and making her a little bit more viable. But thirdly, and I think most importantly for consideration here, and the thing that's got me most interested in her, is that we have the Lieutenant Level 2 option now in synergy, in combination with a new model that can be Chain of Command. So you now have access to the Shukra, not just the Envilla. Okay, if we're talking about OSS, you can't take the Myrmidon Officer. In Vanilla Aleph, she was always able to have that Chain of Command option. But importantly, you've got a linkable Asura who can move out there, act as an offensive lieutenant, and still have a Chain of Command option, is what I want to say. And also, we now have this NCO ability as well. So when you take the Yadu Trooper with the NCO ability, you're making use of both lieutenant orders without necessarily even breaking her out of the HARIS link option. So this Asura level 2 Lieutenant Spitfire is a model which is very, very interesting to me now. I don't think that she's like super broken or really, really powerful, but compared to the older considerations where it's like, well, I don't think the Asura is particularly worth her points. I'd rather leave her at home. I'm not very interested in that model. Now I'm kind of interested in this model because the potential is there. Just quickly, I know there are a lot of people watching these videos, and in particular this commentary right now, and thinking, well, there's the hacking device plus, she's got red rum, the multi-rifle's useful, blah, 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 blah. I feel like I probably could do a lot of commentary on those profiles and explain all of that, but I don't really want to go there. I think at the end of the day, making her a hacker is not really the best. She needs to do some shooting if you're going to be spending 70 odd points on her, and if you do make her a hacker, she's going to be vulnerable to things like Kurnow firing a picture repeater across the board, or even the Druze can do that, or Bakunin, and just hacking you with a killer hacker, and she becomes a liability. You can't afford to lose a 70-point model to a tactic like that. I really just wouldn't recommend the Hacking Device Plus at the end of the day. I mean, I can go into a bigger and deeper argument about it, but I don't really want to. So let's come back to the Asura level 2 Lieutenant. The idea here is that if you make a run with her, she can either lend her Lieutenant 2 orders to a Yadu Trooper to give the Link team more threat range and more steam, more resource, or she can even just break out of the Link team herself, shoot a couple of cheerleaders with her Lieutenant orders, and then you spend a command token to reform the Link, which is a tactic I really quite enjoy. I used to do that a bit with the Joan of Arc, the Crusade Link team. Sorry, I'm using the wrong word. Not so much the Crusade Link team, but the Knights Hospitalia with Joan. Just crack her out of the Link team, spend a Lieutenant's order, and then reform them. But let's say that we go with my recommendation and take the Lieutenant level 2. Where do we go from there? So let's move over to the Yadu Troopers now, because you can run this with 2 Yadu Troopers and 1 Asura, or 2 Devas and 1 Asura, which we'll come back to, but let's focus on the Yadu Trooper lineup. You need 1 Trooper with the HARIS ability to pull this off. Now, of course, we can go back to the Asura and pick the Asura HARIS option, but she is just the regular Spitfire and not the Lieutenant. Yeah, you can probably play it that way if you really want the Asura to be the HARIS and you really want 2 other troopers that don't have the HARIS ability, and then you take your plain old Shukra Lieutenant. But the reason I don't like that is that you're probably going to be running this as a 10-order list, in my view. Your Link team's going to get so expensive with Asura being in there that playing it as a limited insertion list is probably for the best, especially since you want to be Alpha Strike and get the most out of it. That it's not really worth spending the extra points on a guy that has counterintelligence. Having said that, you may well want to go back to the Deva option and go, okay, I'll take a cheap Deva Lieutenant, which is not normally what you do, but cheap Deva Lieutenant plus Asura HARIS option plus 2 very powerful Yadu Troopers. Still, I really don't think that's the way to go. Let's go back to the Yadu Troopers for a second. If you take the NCO HMG, you can move your Link team around with 2 extra orders, because spending the NCO ability on the Lieutenant's not going to break the Link team. So let's say you've got a limited insertion list with 10 orders, including these 2 models. You can roll out with a 12-order push. So you're starting to get into the tactical awareness territory of threat range then. And the idea being that you can run across the board, get into range where, let's say, to get out of your deployment zone, you use the Yadu Trooper with the HMG. Maybe they've got some sort of intruder sniper out there. The Asura could even just pop that open with MSV-3, and then you attack with the Yadu Trooper. You will have to have at least 1 shootout between the Asura and the intruder, but she can probably take it. She's got a lot of wounds. Then the Yadu Trooper clears them up, hopefully. Then you start moving into their territory and start picking things off very easily. The Asura with MSV-3 can be really powerful against Nomads and Ariadna and any faction that includes quite a lot of camo, because she just pops that open and kills them very effectively. You're looking at factions like Hakislam, where there's a lot of smoke being thrown around. The Asura is great against that. She unfortunately doesn't have any shock on her Spitfire. But a couple of other things to consider is that the Yadu Troopers have veterans, so you can move them in range of the jammers without being hit, keep the Asura back a bit, and potentially kill them. They're also not going to be isolated by the Emirats either, and maybe can tank a wound from a chain rifle. With that in mind, the third Yadu can be the HARIS option with the multi-rifle, so quite like this then, because once you get across to their side of the table and you're seeing troops like Ghazi Motiwa, you can move the Yadu with the multi-rifle in range to shoot them, and if they win the face-to-face roll to plant the smoke down, the Asura can just blast them. So this is actually quite an interesting little HARIS team. You've even got the drop bears there as well. Not a bad idea, and the drop bears are even better in the Link team because you get 2 throws. So yeah, this is 150 points. It's half your army, but again, you're spending the rest of your points just on the peripheral stuff to back you up. You'll take the posthumans, some flash pulse bots to add, you know, the cheerleaders in there that you can't really afford otherwise. You might pop in an Asura, a Sophitect, just to help out with maybe the Asura if she takes a couple of wounds. I believe that when she goes to the NWI state, you can revive her from that. And you basically bank your play on these three models doing most of the work. Note that you can still afford other stuff, right? So let's just have a quick look. So Lamed Rebot, a couple of Flash Pulse pulses there, and a couple of Minesweeper bots, and we're already at a point where we've got a lot of points spare. If I put the Sophitect in, if we take the Proxy Hacker, for example, and we take the Sniper as well, don't want to leave home without that guy, well backed up. Actually, that might not be possible with the SWCs that we've spent. So there'd be another way to do this. Instead of taking the Proxy Hacker, because you're not going to be needing assisted fire in this list, let's go for the Proxy Mark 4, is it? No, not the 4. The Proxy Mark 5 Forward Reserver. That way you've got the two proxies in there. And then what you can do is take a Killer Hacker in the form of, say, a Naga Killer Hacker. And you've still got 23 points left over and a slot. So that 23 points could be, maybe if we save a little a bit here. So we've gone slightly over budget, but a Shukra chain of command can be nice, because if you're committing the Asura so far into enemy lines and she dies, well, at least you've got the chain of command back here. So yeah, you could juggle this around a little bit. You could even drop the Sophitect, since she may not be as needed in this list. You could turn the Probot into just a AI beacon. So just have a bit of fun, like playing around with it. But I think the point's there that group of three has a lot going for it. There's also another way to do it. So let's just go back to it again. If we go back to the Asura and take the level 2 lieutenant, let's pretend for some reason we don't want the Yadu who has the multi-rifle with the HARIS option. Another way to pull that off is to go for Shakti, because Shakti has it built in. Let me just see if I can find her. Here she is here. So if we've already got the Asura Lieutenant being our main like play, we won't need Shakti the Lieutenant, so we'll take the other version. The thing about Shakti is she's very expensive. 40 full points for that. But there are a few things to like about her in this circumstance, in this context. She's got a killer hacking device which makes her a specialist. Whip 14 specialist, very good. If your Asura suddenly gets hacked out of nowhere, the Shakti might be able to come in and save her. Let's say you run into a spot where they're trying to oblivion her with a camo hacker and you weren't expecting that, so you reset, maybe you manage to survive. Shakti takes out that hacker, then you continue moving. So that can be very strong. Just like the Yadus, she's a veteran, so that helps her from prevents her from being isolated by a jammer, for example. Can be really crucial in these missions where you've got to get to a particular objective on this side of the table. That's a big deal. The Mark 12, I doubt you'll be seeing a lot of that, given that the Asura is going to be a lot better at shooting things with her Spitfire and, you know, higher ballistic skill MSV3 and that sort of thing. But yeah, Shakti, very strong, very tough. If you can afford the 40 points, yep, that makes it pretty cool. And then what you can do is you can go over to your Yadu and just pick anyone you like, really. It doesn't have to be the HARIS option. So again, we can go for the HMG. I think the HMG is a really good choice just for the reasons we talked about. That NCO ability makes the most of the Asura level 2 ability. If you're on a bit more of a dense table and you can get away with not needing that HMG range band, you may well go for one of the other options in here. Let's have a quick look at them. You could just take the basic multi-rifle, I suppose. There's an assault hacking device boarding shotgun, although again, it's a bit risky. Again, I think the multi-rifle, the HMG is probably the strongest Yadu choice in that situation. But right now I want to just turn our attention to a new unit, and that's the Rudra gunbot. And the Rudra says it can join any Yadu trooper's fire team, and this is where I think the Rudra actually has a place in lists. The Rudra on paper, I feel, is a bit weak. It's the kind of unit that's supposed to fulfill the same role as a Bulleteer or a Ruishi. The thing about those guys is that they do a better job than the Rudra for less points. Yes, the Rudra is more heavily armored and has more wounds, 2 structure points, and has climbing plus. But the thing is, when you're using a fast attack piece, you just want to be winning the face-to-face rolls outright. You don't want to be losing them and tanking it. So spending, your investment in a Bulleteer or a Rishi is better because you'll win face-to-face rolls with the ODD or the Smoke MSV2 combo, for example. The thing about the Rudra, though, is it can be linked, unlike the Bulleteer and the Rishi, and we're just going to excuse the exception of Deshat for a second with the Rishi. But with the Rudra, if you're just running it by itself in vanilla or left, for example, I don't think it's really worth it for its points, because there are other things you can take in that sectorial which can move out quickly and attack and do damage. But if you're already going to be taking your Yadu Trooper Link team, you can put in one of these profiles. I specifically like the K1 Marksman Rifle profile the best, just because you're going to be wanting to give it assisted fire almost all of the time if you're going to be using it, because then it ignores cover. Assisted fire gives you the option to ignore cover and have shock, whereas the multi-rifle and Red Fury have shock already, so it's a bit redundant. But then again, the K1 Marksman Rifle can be pretty useful in a situation where you're moving around there and you run into something with armor 5 or greater and you've got a decent shot at it, especially since you might be able to use Climbing Plus to get up and over to a spot where your opponent was trying to hide their tag or something like that, and then you start shooting it with a K1 Marksman Rifle. That can be game winning. So in a situation like that, the Rudra Gunbot could be a lot more useful than another another Yadu Trooper, for example. Also, when you've moved into enemy territory, and let's say you've cleaned out a whole bunch of cheerleaders and you're set up and your turn's over, you're having to defend. Now, the Asura are very strong at defending. It's got heavy armor, good bliss skill, MSV3, great arrow piece, especially with the link bonus. The Rudra, again, is much better at defending than the Bulleteer or the Rishi because you've got that armor and those structure points, and you can shoot twice. Also, you could use the Mine Dispenser to help set that up. So let's say you've rolled over there with a full 12 orders worth of attacks, considering Lieutenant level 2. You've carved out a little corner of the table for yourself. Maybe in your last order or two, you've got nothing much more to do because you can't really get line of sight to anybody else. The Rudra could move up buildings and hide somewhere. It could throw down a couple of mines to defend Shakti and the Asura for a while. So I can kind of see that kind of thing working. It's sort of useful. It's still very expensive. We've got 154 points spent here, but yeah, maybe it's viable. Red Fury and multi-rifle, I mean, they're still good guns, but I think the K1 Marksman Rifle, if you can afford it, it's the most expensive profile there. It's the way to go. If you absolutely have to cut something out of your list and there's no other 3 points that you can get rid of, the multi-rifle, I think, is fine. This Rudra can be a bit of a surprise to people coming up on top of buildings with Climbing Plus and shooting things like lieutenants or important specialists that your opponent wasn't really expecting. And if you are in that situation where you come around the corner and you're able to get the jump on some sort of tag, well, at least it's half armor with the multi-rifle and similar number of shots as the marksman rifle there. So that's pretty cool. Just going back to the Yadus, of course, Shakti, we talked about including her. Again, there is the combination of just going back to the Yadu Trooper with just the HARIS team and the Rudra. This is a link team that I looked at running for the longest time. I played at least one game with it. 151 points. The thing about this combination is you've still got plenty of SWCs freed up for your posthumans, things like that. The Yadu Trooper can fulfill that role of ignoring the jammer for the close range objectives. And multi-rifle, sometimes better to have that really short-range gun. If you've got Asura and Shakti and the Rudra with those particular loadouts, you've got no trooper which is +3 at 0 to 8 inches, so having that Yadu in there with the multi-rifle could be powerful. And that Emirite's very nice as well. I think Shakti's got one as well, does she? Yeah, she's got an Emirate as well. So the Yadu or Shakti, that can be kind of cool. Again, you're in that situation where your opponent's got maybe something like an avatar or something really strong, a cutter. If you move up close to it, they really have to dodge, otherwise they get hit by the Emirate, allowing you to just shoot and shoot and shoot with the multi-rifle at very close range, maybe actually killing it if you have enough orders up your sleeve. So this is a really, really interesting HARIS option, and it's based around the Asura, and I want to try it out in a lot more games. I've only played a few games with mixed success with this, but I'm still getting my head around it. It's not a very easy list to play. There are a lot of mistakes you can make in terms of, how aggressive to be or how defensive to be. If you move out and find that you don't have the tools, don't have the movement speed, don't have the range really to get it done, you leave your link team stranded, you lose half your army and the game's just over. Before we move on past the Asura, I just want to look back at her and note that she can be linked up with 2 Devas instead of Yadus and so forth. So this is a bit less flexible because then you can't include Shakti, you can't include the Rudra. But the point about the Devas is that they are a lot cheaper. So you're going to have to take the HARIS option. That's going to be a necessity unless you're really going to go with the Asura HARIS option, for example. So once you've ticked that box, you've got the other choice. And of all these Devas, I feel like the one that's most relevant is actually just going to be the plain old Forward Observer, because you've already got the sensor in there with the HARIS. There's no other specialist option other than that Forward Observer, unless you really want to take the Assault Hacker, which is not really going to be that great out midfield, or the regular Hacker, because it's going to be vulnerable to killer hackers. But this setup is also interesting because now you're only spending 121 points rather than 150, so you got more stuff to use elsewhere. The good thing about the sensor is that you go midfield, you reveal hidden deployment troopers, and the Asura is just going to eat them for breakfast because she's ignoring their -6 for TO. So that could be very, very strong. The Devas, unfortunately, unlike the Yadu troopers, don't have shock immunity and don't have veteran, so they can kind of get crushed by mines and things like that. If you're not careful, it can get a bit awkward. Like, you're moving around there and your opponent responds by just placing a mine in range of your guys, and you have to move out and dodge, and it just gets a little bit nasty. But yeah, if you really want other stuff in your list that happens to be expensive and you need to cut points, but you still want to take the Asura Link team, you may still be able to get that ball-busting rollout with the Alpha, 12 orders worth, if you include the 2 Lieutenant options like that. You could even consider running just a Yadu HMG on its own, like outside of this, for the NCO to gun a few things down with the Lieutenant orders and then roll out with a Link team. I wouldn't really recommend it, but I think that's another thing that's potentially viable. So yeah, that little triple setup with the Devas, not bad. I think now time to move on a little bit to one of our other HARIS options. Let me just see if I can find the Rudra again. Let's say we go for the Rudra, but choose not to include an Asura. That changes things up even more. Say we go to the Yadu NCO HMG. We could then take the Rudra Gunbot as well, because it can be one of the Yadus. Let's find it here. Let's make it a K1 Marksman Rifle Rudra. Then we can come back to the Devas, because it actually says here, let's take the HARIS option. So according to the Yadus, it says you can take 2 Yadus and 1 Deva, which is the other option. That way you can use the Deva as your HARIS boy, and that's effectively counting as 2 Yadus and 1 Deva, but the Rudra is standing in for one of the Yadus. The merits of this little triple man fire team is that you can play a lot more on the rest of your list, because you're now only spending 108 points now that you're doing away with the Asura. So that can be kind of strong, but you're still able to make a little bit of use of the NCO HMG. Let's say we take yet another Deva who's not going to be part of the link, who's just a Lieutenant for 23 points. So you're effectively spending 11 orders potentially on this little link, and you're still able to do some of the things we were talking about before, where the Rudra can move up on top of buildings, shoot things that weren't expecting to be shot. The Yadu can muscle its way out of the deployment zone. I actually had a game recently against a fairly new opponent, so it was a bit one-sided because of that, but I at least had a chance to try that out. Let me just see if I can quickly find it. It was OSS versus Corregidor Acquisition. I won't go into full depth with the bat rep, but it was an interesting one, because I could roll out with the Rudra and the Yadu and get some damage done, but this was a list where I had enough points left over for 3 Nagas, so I still had the Naga Killer Hacker, I had the Naga Forward Observer, I even had the Naga Sniper Rifle, and I was able to take what she called Dart as well. So the Yadu Trooper Link team didn't really even need to do that much work. I was able to just shoot a few things with the HMG, maybe move out with the bot a little bit with Climbing Plus, killing a Jaguar, as you can see here. And then for dealing with things long range, I also had the Naga and all these specialists to roll out with, and the list was a lot more flexible as a result of that. Now again, this was a game against like a newer player, and it was more like teaching some of the rules during that time, so it wasn't really a true test of it, but I felt quite comfortable with the list. So just coming back to Army 6 for a moment, you can sort of see how you don't have to rely on that HARIS team as much as you do when you're putting the Asura in there. So I think that could be quite strong. What haven't I talked about? I think that's about all I really wanted to say about this. I think the Rudra is such an awesome model. I really like the idea of finding ways to use it. The Asura, the new model is kind of cool. They might even bring out another sculpt for it. Yeah, I know a lot of people love the Hacking Device Plus. I might even run it at some point. But again, it just seems like a bit of a waste, really, when you can take the Spitfire, which to me seems like the more powerful profile, if anything. I even thought about running Andromeda in one of these lists as well, just because she's such a meme. Let me see if I can find my version that I played the other day. So here's actually the list that I made, that I had this game with recently. So Rudra multi-rifle, Yadu HMG, Deva HARIS. Then you've got the proxy hacker to put assist to fire onto the Rudra with the multi-sniper, always take that profile. Then there's the flashball spot. You've got Dart with the EM grenades profile, Naga sniper, forward observer, killer hacker, and a Deva lieutenant. If we look at this, potentially one thing we can do is drop Dart or drop the Naga killer hacker and sub in an Andromeda. And the idea behind that is you try to get first turn, you try to superior infiltrate Andromeda, you specifically take this one profile here for 31 points with the SMG. And look, if she fails her roll, so be it. It's a 75% chance. If she fails her roll, she's deployed in your table side. She just hangs out as a cheerleader, and you attack with everything else you've got, like Dart or your Nagas or the Link team. But if she passes her roll, then you can start moving in and trading things. And at that range, she's not that bad. If she moves into close combat with something and shoots at the same time, they're trying to respond, they're going up against guard level 3. They could be in a little bit of trouble. She's still not great. She's still a pretty crap unit, to be honest, but this is the closest they've come to making her viable, I reckon. Looking at this list here, I think probably the best thing to drop would actually be Dart. Sad to say. I mean, Dart's pretty cool, and Dart's probably better than Andromeda, but if you really particularly feel like trying the superior infiltrating Andromeda, then that's a way of fitting into a 10-order limited insertion list. Alright, now I think I have talked about HARIS options in a fair bit of depth in this video. Hopefully we'll have some bat reps with OSS coming up that features some 3-man link teams with the Asura, hopefully. We'll see how they do. Thanks for checking it out, guys. You have a good day.